Good afternoon, all. Welcome. You're watching the Sal Greco Show. Thanks for tuning in. If you are watching us on YouTube, please hit the like, share, subscribe button. Hit the notification button as well. If you're watching us on X, please hit the repost button. Share this out to all your friends. But welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. With that being said, before anything else, I'd like to state that I want to give a big kudos and a shout out to not only the Executive Perspective, which was on yesterday, but John McCarr and Eric Dim yesterday morning on the Finest Unfiltered. They had on mayoral candidate for New York City, and he's he's up in the polls there, Zohran Mamdani. People say he's a socialist, whatever the case may be. A lot of people are behind him. He is getting the most contributions for a campaign monetarily from small donors, that's a grounds roots operation. He was on yesterday, and here he is. He even said in his own post that he was grateful for the opportunity to join the Finest Unfiltered yesterday. Open, honest conversations across political differences are so important for the future of our city, even and especially when we disagree, which I agree. I actually enjoyed the whole segment. I believe the problem here, though, was there was a little bit of a what we call in the business filibustering. So when the going went tough and John and Eric finally tuned it up a notch and tried to hold his feet to the fire, he had to go. And he only gave 20 minutes or so, and I believe he promised to come back, which I hope he does, because there was plenty of people watching. And I saw the views, so I know that has nothing to do with viewership. I believe it was a combination of things, but from being involved in politics all these years, I can tell you when the going went hot, he filibustered and he wanted out. So that's what it looked like to me. But great job by John and Eric, who not only had Zohran Mamdani on, they've also had Paperboy Prince on, another mayoral candidate. They've had others, but these two guys I want to mention in particular because I think last night there was a mayoral forum in Brooklyn, which he did attend, and there was a little bit of a ruckus that occurred there also. All right. And here's a little bit. Here's Paperboy Prince, who showed up. Now, he's a mayoral candidate, and I don't understand why he had to. He basically got escorted out. Okay. I don't know why. And the other thing I want to say is, why is the NYPD Community Affairs Bureau acting as the security for the event when the event should have had their own security? And you can tell they're making him leave. Now, I know, I've been to these events as a police officer myself, but I was never the lead. It's always a security officer, someone that works for the event, that points this out and escorts you and then tells the police that, look, the police just rushed the stage for stuff. And here's more protesters that were there to accost Andrew Cuomo, who said Andrew Cuomo lied and people died, which I believe to be a true statement in regards to how he handled the entire pandemic 5 years ago, which, I think would be a damaging issue for him running his campaign. But we'll get to that later on. But as you could tell, that forum looked to be chaotic. And I don't understand, again, why community affairs has to be the first on scene to grab someone off the stage or take police action when I thought security was there and they're supposed to be doing that first, because that could be a whole problem down the road if there's any legal issues or arrests or challenges and whatnot. But again, all of that stemmed from the morning with Zohran Mamdani. That's a good meme. Look at that. Also, he looks pretty small in his chair, Andrew Cuomo. But again, you see the police, presence up front. And I don't understand why they were so, up forward. I've seen it before. I just say, folks, I don't understand why the police department is handling virtually the security for an event that usually would have their own. That's basically the gist of that. And that's a first. Here the protesters, look, see, they're getting arrested. Obviously, it's a sergeant, which shows that there was low manpower to begin with, since we don't have a big, we'll say, the personnel that's being misused and mismanaged in the NYPD. So a sergeant's putting his hands on, that shows that there's cops running around doing all kinds of things at this event because they're short-staffed. They're not short-staffed, they're just misuse of the staff. See, there's more people getting on the stage, which shows that this forum is chaotic, very chaotic. There wasn't anything under control. The planning was terrible, and that's the organizers that plan this. Never think things through. So that event was a barn burner of a chaotic Michigas all in one. So segueing into the next topic, which is something that I, as a police officer, witnessed, and it's a hot topic in the NYPD, and just the way how to drum people out of the NYPD, which are dull tests. And there's someone who has come forward with a wonderful lawsuit here. So I'm going to read this off to you just because this is an important thing, because it's a challenge to the system, okay? So this is from the Gothamist. NYPD officer says weed testing unfairly targets those with dark hair. All right, this is by Charles Lane. This was today. A veteran Latino NYPD officer has filed a federal complaint accusing the Department of Discrimination, claiming its marijuana testing policy unfairly targets people with dark hair. Frankie Pagliucci, I hope I said his name right, that's how I would say it, who has almost 20 years of service and no disciplinary record, said he was demoted from detective to police officer after his hair sample tested positive for marijuana, a substance he denies using. His complaint, which was filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, challenges the NYPD's drug testing procedure as inconsistent and scientifically flawed, alleging that the policy allows officers who may use drugs to remain on duty while subjecting others to retaliation. In a complaint, Pagliucci said other officers in similar situations were allowed to return to duty after blaming positive drug tests on secondhand exposure. I was reassigned to administrative duty while similarly situated officers who also tested positive were excused and returned to full duty without formal charges or trial, Pagliucci said. He also described the system as a structural failure in the design, oversight, and enforcement of the NYPD's disciplinary practices. An NYPD spokesperson didn't address questions about the fairness of its drug testing program and indicated that the department follows the proper drug testing procedure. The spokesperson said the procedure allows officers with positive drug tests to seek an independent analysis. The NYPD's policy, however, requires that all samples be collected by the department in order to ensure proper chain of custody. Pagliucci's complaint doesn't specify who collected his samples, but he also paid for 4 additional independent tests, all of which returned negative results for drugs, and took a polygraph and a toenail drug test, which came back negative. Lawyers behind the discrimination complaint allege the NYPD's drug testing policy is part of a long-standing system that shields favored officers and targets others for retaliation. Eric Sanders, a former police officer and the attorney who helped bring the discrimination complaint, claimed unfair drug testing protects officers who might be using drugs. They're not fair about the testing, he said. It's random standards. It's arbitrary. This affects the taxpayers because it essentially puts people out there who are not qualified. The NYPD selects officers for drug testing when they are suspected of drug use or through a random process determined by a database according to the department's patrol guide. The guide stipulates that both hair and urine samples can be collected, and officers have the right to obtain an independent test of samples already collected by the NYPD's medical division. Officers who test positive for drug use face potential discipline and suspension. The allegations came at a time when, under Mayor Eric Adams' administration, the Crumbs administration, the NYPD has faced multiple lawsuits and department investigations tied to allegations of cronyism and continues to grapple with recruitment woes and repeated reports of off-duty officers driving under the influence. The department continues to test police for marijuana despite the state legalizing weed in 2021. In 2022, the law department reportedly advised city agencies to cease such random testing, but the NYPD refused to follow this guidance. Several scientific studies have questioned the fairness of hair sample testing, noting that darker hair may retain evidence of drug use longer than lighter hair, but the scientific evidence, especially regarding marijuana retention in dark hair, remains inconclusive, according to some researchers. Sanders said the case is less about Pagliucci than about the lack of transparency in the department's drug testing protocols. He said Pagliucci's complaint offered him a chance to confront the issue. I have to have the right case, he said. That this is the first time I have a real case I can do with it. The Detectives Endowment Association, the union representing NYPD detectives, declined to comment, but the group, according to the complaint, requested clarification on the department's policy on marijuana use. So, folks, just so you understand what's going on there, first of all, this test, I can attest to, is a complete farce and an arbitrary thing. And I'll tell you why. Many years ago, just to show you how systematic this was, I was in the medical division for the second time, I believe, in my care. I believe I only did this 3 times random, which random is a word thrown around a lot. And when I was taking this Dole test, right, when I was there, there was a list for the next day because it was after 5 p.m. when I was there. So they were, they only have a shift that's the daytime shift, I believe, is only 1, and they were all going home before 6 or 7 p.m. So this list was already done for the following day's Dole test. And then the officer that was there received a phone call. And of course, when you hear, yes, sir, oh, sir, the list was done, sir. And then all of a sudden, this random pick of names, one name he had to get rid of. He was in the system in a computer running a tax number, which is tax identification number of another officer, which is how all the officers are known, is by the tax number. Pulled up this, whoever this was, and then added that tax number to this list while crossing off the other while he's on the phone saying, all right, sir. All right, sir. So this whole, as you could tell right there, and I looked at him, and this officer smiled when I said, so much for random testing, huh? And he laughed, or he smiled. So he knew that I knew that this whole thing was a farce. But this test, it's not scientific, okay? What is the purpose of the whole test? Because the government employees, they don't have to do this. Why? Because this has holes, all right? It's invalid. It doesn't cast any validity to it, okay? This whole test. And again, the government doesn't use it for a reason, because it could be contaminated. Many years ago, there was a female, they said, that tested positive because of her hair, yet we came to find out it was a weave. It wasn't even her hair. So I'm all for this. This is a direct challenge to something that should have been challenged decades ago. It's the test is basically a way to drum out who someone doesn't like. Any rank from sergeant up can call up and say, I believe officer so-and-so or whoever is taking steroids. And now all of a sudden it's a witch hunt. And some people that I know on this, that were on a job, had done numerous tests. So they were targeted. That is arbitrary. You don't target people. I mean, what is this? I don't like this guy and I come after him. Much so like my own case and many other cases that are ongoing. This is arbitrary, and this is the best way moving forward to challenge the system. So kudos to Mr. Pagliucci, and also, once again, to Eric Sanders for bringing this case forward. And I hope to see a resolution that shows how biased this whole thing really was, because you can't even guarantee the validity of the test, which is why the government does not use it for their own employees when they are accused of taking drugs, whatever that means, okay? Well, that's the segue now into who I have on today. She's a show favorite. The crowd loves her. I respect the hell out of her work. As you know, she's an attorney, but what was she? She was a former Brooklyn prosecutor and also the former corrections commissioner at the same time, who would have handled the internal disciplinary cases at Rikers, especially for, I don't know, if you were alleged to have helped the federal government in identifying illegal immigrants there. You can't do that. That's a city law against that. And, Sarena has had this. So welcome, Sarena Townsend, back to the Sal Greco show. Sarena.
What an intro.
And just to clarify, am I right that you had to have cases of Rikers of corrections officers that tried to cooperate with the feds on an illegal immigrant or ICE detainer warrant, but that's against the rules. Am I correct?
That is correct. And we had to discipline people who turned people over to ICE. That is right.
And that is the gist of what I've said, because as I said, when initially, and we'll get to that with the Eric Adams case, when it said that he was going to cooperate with ICE and you saw this executive order, I had said it would be challenged and overturned because the executive order cannot supersede the law that's there. This has been going on for a long time. If you want to change, you need to vote all the legislators out, all the city council, and turn the law over. I don't see any way forward with it. I think they're having another hearing on Friday about the case, but I don't know. I guess both of us seem to always be right, and the media seems to be behind.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. It is. Now, you seem to be the foregoing expert on this whole subject matter I'm going to bring up, which is the Luigi Mangione case. Now,
Yes.
full disclosure, me and Sarena are actually on the same page on this, okay? And the reason being is, now I understand that he might have committed this murder. We don't know yet, okay? Or, you see videos and signs of this, but the way his case has been handled from the moment it was known or put out that they suspected him, which they found out later on, he was hiding out in Pennsylvania, that they believe Luigi is the main suspect in this case, has been appalling. And it's a throwback to how, if people can remember, the O.J. Simpson case, okay?
Yep.
And there it is that he was indicted by the feds now, okay, in this case, because Pam Bondi, who's the attorney general for the United States and the DOJ, she's seeking the death penalty. As you can see right on the bottom, it says, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi directed prosecutors to seek the death penalty. Now, I don't know, Sarena. It sounds, they're like targeting this guy all over the place. Yeah. And again, you've been on the forefront of all of this, and I'm right with you because I believe this case is absolutely tainted from the beginning to the end, the way they've handled it. So why don't you give us your entire take on this, especially now that there's an indictment from the feds, which I don't know why they did this so soon, but they're still pending all these other things they did with the NYPD. So give us your take on this.
Sure. Yeah. So first off, he had already been indicted by the state, right? As you know, New York State prosecutors, the DA's office in Manhattan, already indicted him a while ago on a case that I think you would agree is overcharged, right? I mean, any case where you commit murder intentionally and with pre-planning is typically charged as a murder in the second degree on the state level. In Manhattan, they indicted him not only on murder too, but also the bump up charge of murder in the first degree, which is usually reserved for Sal, as you know, killing a cop, killing a judge, killing a witness informant, right? So they overcharge him in New York State, claiming that he did so with like terroristic intent. Amazing, right? We don't indict school shootings like that, but we'll indict this one, accused murderer of that. So there's that. That case is chugging along. That case, importantly, is easily prosecuted and handled by the state. And that's typically how it's done. Now you have the feds who came in a rush job right after he was arrested by NYPD, and they put forth this complaint. This was also like months ago, right after the state arrested him and did this whole perp walk with our favorite Mayor Eric Adams, right? The feds are like, whoa, we want this case. This is a sexy case. This is a case that's going to make headlines. We want it, right? They come in and they throw out a complaint against him, but they hadn't indicted him yet. Now, the complaint is very important because it mirrors the indictment that just came out. The complaint and the indictment both accuse him of 4 different charges. But the 4 charges that they accuse him of rely on a few different things that push it from a state case to a federal case. How does it get from a state? Yeah, there you go. There he is. There's Mayor Eric Adams, everybody in the background. Why is he there? No one knows.
Cops. 30 of them.
730 cops, right off the helicopter pad. Like, what are we doing here? Mayor Eric Adams, who got his own case dismissed because of prejudicial things that were happening. We'll talk about that. And here he is, front and center. All right. The federal case relies on a few things, just so our viewers understand. What takes a case out of state and into federal, it has to meet certain additional standards or elements that are not just needed for a state case. So, for example, they have to show, at least in this case with Luigi, that Luigi traveled or used interstate commerce. Fine, there is evidence of that. But also, in order to keep it federal, they have to show that he stalked Brian Thompson, the victim in this case. Okay. The first 2 counts on the federal indictment are stalking charges. And the second 2 counts, the murder and the firearms possession, rely on the fact that the allegation that he murdered Thompson and did so with a firearm while stalking him. So every single one of those 4 charges rely on stalking. And how is the stalking delineated in the indictment is that he placed Brian Thompson in reasonable fear of death or imminent grave physical injury. So Brian Thompson had to know that he was being stalked in order for that stalking charge and then therefore the murder and the firearm charges to stick. So that's what's been going on, Sal.
Even the charges in itself, and again, I believe what you're saying, they're being rushed because he was already facing the state charges, which, again, you just saw this perp walk, right? There's 30 cops there. It took 2 guys could have done this, right, to just transport him in. The mayor's on this perp walk with him. Then what you're missing, you didn't say here was they did a show on HBO where they discussed discovery. And then in the discovery that they're discussing on the show, not even his own defense counsel has this discovery.
Right.
Then you brought up, Billy, the last time you were on, the police commissioner, everyone's favorite, Jessica Tisch. I mean, look at this. 30 guys for him. And by the way, he has no leg shackles, just so you understand. And NYPD, that's a cardinal sin. He's such a flight risk and such a bad guy that he doesn't have leg shackles on. But look at this picture. You would think this guy is Juan Pablo Escobar. Look at this picture, okay? FBI, JTTF. By the way, it was somebody in Pennsylvania that had called in to say, oh, this gentleman is sitting here at a McDonald's. But yet 30 guys show up for this. This is all Eric Adams, by the way, who is on his first career perp walk, may I add. I don't believe Eric Adams ever arrested anyone. I think he had like 10 arrests his whole career. And it's laughable. And here, McDonald's employee who called in Luigi Mangione tip only get $50K, right? And that $50K, I don't know if he ever got it. And it's only if he's a conviction. So he may not even get convicted because the whole thing is tainted. But you have that on also with, you mentioned something else, that the police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, everyone's darling. She has 50,000 puff pieces, yet corruption's flourishing underneath her, including allegations of her own corruption. But now she goes out there and she says something that'll taint the whole investigation. So those are 2 things if you could bring up, because I think it's going to cost the whole case.
Yeah, there's so much to say about this case. So Jessica Tisch apparently is profiled in, I think, New York Magazine. And for whatever reason, she and people who work with her give a ton of information about the steps that were taken during the investigation and the attempt to capture Luigi, which is so strange to me, right? Like, why are they, right? Like, the case is pending and they're giving all of this information to New York Magazine about how the investigation was proceeding. And by the way, it's not a puff piece in the end. It actually makes Jessica Tisch look terrible because it has Jessica Tisch in the paper questioning whether they even got the right guy. She's talking about, and it's embarrassing the way she says it, right? She's like, he's not, I don't know. Look at this surveillance video. Look at that surveillance video. I don't know if that's him. He's not chiseled enough. He's not handsome enough. His eyebrows aren't wild enough. Like, what? These statements that are being made, like, aside from being weird and maybe unprofessional, but like, the fact that it's being told to New York Magazine, I mean, you're literally giving defense attorneys fodder to use for cross-examination. I would subpoena her and put her on the stand because that's reasonable doubt, right? Did you get the right guy? The identity of the perpetrator is just as important to prove beyond a reasonable doubt as the elements of the crime. So you're questioning whether you got the right guy. That's a problem. So there's that. Then there's also, keep in mind, Sal, we didn't even discuss the fact that they're looking, the feds now are looking for the death penalty in this case, right?
That's insane. I'll tell you what, Sarena,
please.
I'm just going to mention back in the comments here, somebody actually mentioned this case. I think here, Chronicles of the Collapse said, crazy that the migrant who torched the poor woman on the subway is looking at less punishment. Okay, just so for the record, people know, if you remember that, this poor woman that was torched to death by an illegal immigrant, okay, you don't see no death penalty there. There's silence, right? But we're going to give the death penalty to this guy in a case where Eric Adams wanted to profile himself as some kind of hero, former cop, because he was never a real cop. And all of a sudden, we have to give this guy a death penalty. Yet they've tainted this case every step of the way. So continue on with
100%. That video of that poor woman in the subway is really the stuff of nightmares. And we're not going to put that guy to death. Make it make sense. Right? So the death penalty conversation is a really important one. There's a couple of things that could push a case into death penalty status on a federal case. Let's remind our viewers, New York State does not have the death penalty. So even if he's convicted in New York State of the top count, murder in the first degree, death is not on the line. It's just not on the table. The federal case, right? We have Pam Bondi saying, seek the death penalty. We have to keep in mind, there are aggravating factors that have to be met in order to push a case into death penalty status. It's not as simple as killing somebody or having a firearm. You have to also meet certain aggravating factors. And there's a list of aggravating factors that you could meet to get yourself into death penalty status. The only death penalty factor that could possibly apply to this case, the Luigi case, is that he planned it he took a lot of steps to plan it in advance, allegedly. Okay. That is probably like the lowest level of aggravating factor that you could even consider for death penalty, because look at what the other ones are, right? The other ones are, do they have like a long rap sheet, and have they killed before? Did they kill in like an especially grievous or heinous way? Like, are they torturing their victim, like taking, you know what I'm talking about, like serial killers, people who have previous sex crimes in their past. These are people, and there's reason why those are the aggravating factors, because it's trying to tell the public, this is not somebody who we could rehabilitate. This is not somebody who deserves to live. Like, could you imagine? The standard better be sky high if you're going to take someone's life away, right? And so the Luigi case is very different from any other case that has been death penalty pursued by the feds in the past. The defense wrote a motion kind of saying that in the past 40 years, there have been 17 death penalty cases by the feds. And what they did masterfully in their motion is they went through each of the 17. And all these people are like drug kingpin, murderous, long-term criminals, Sal, right? Like, this is a guy, I'm not saying that if he did something, if he actually committed the murder, he should walk free. I'm not saying walk free, but we're going to put him to death, and you're going to compare him to, El Chapo or people like that. I mean, come on, who are we talking about? And why are we putting him in death penalty status? Why? Doesn't make sense.
I am not only in agreement with you, I am flabbergasted by everything. And Marlon Bethel had said, about this the perp walk, he said this was to make him a political martyr that could be used by the media to create copycats and protests. I think he's on to something there. I thought when I first saw this, and the defense and the way it was, the way they're saying with everything here is ridiculous, And yeah, Eric Dim, shout out to him. He was in there. He also said Mayor Eric Adams tainted this case with that staged perp walk. So again, all these factors, people need to remember this. People have you're not guilty. You're innocent until proven guilty. Not the mob. That's why the mob rule doesn't rule this country. We're going to go after this guy because we want to go after him. We want to crush this guy. He had to have done it. You don't know that yet. It looks that way, but you can't taint the case as well. All right. Yeah, here's Rob Lukash from the executive perspective. He chimes in too. If they were so concerned for his safety of flight, they would have driven him to a secure location and march him in an open heliport. I mean, there's so many things that are wrong here. And the fact that Pam Bondi comes out and says, I'm seeking a death penalty, when you have an illegal migrant there torch someone on a train. We've had numerous other cases of illegal migrants, or call them gang members, doing heinous crimes. One guy, last week, talk about this in New York City, Serena. They say that, we all know that violent crimes are skyrocketing no matter what John Shell and Kaz Dordry and Eric Adams spin the spin room. All they do is try to control narrative. That's false. Someone, not only was they say that rapes are up, a dead person was raped on the train.
Oh my
God.
God.
It was a male. Okay. So you have depraved human beings running around New York City. I don't see any talk of the death penalty, severe punishment. It's just, let's pick this guy in particular.
Not even a federal indictment, right?
The federal indictment reads like that. And to me, this is I see an O.J. Simpson kind of scenario where O.J., there was so much evidence against him. And to this day, we should easily say, yeah, O.J. did it, right? But then you look at how they handled it. That's where the case went south. It was not handled correctly.
Exactly. And that's where jury nullification comes in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really what the O.J. Simpson case is about is jury nullification. It's a bunch of, it's a whole sect of jurors who looked and watched not only at the case itself, but they took into consideration the culture of the police that handled that case, the culture of the environment that they were in. They took into consideration everything. And Sal, as you and I both know, when a judge instructs a jury, yes, they say you can't consider things that are not in evidence. You can't, read things in the media. You can't do that. You have to only judge things based on the evidence in the case. But a judge also tells a jury, you can't leave your common sense at the door. You have to bring your common sense with you. And a jury is going to come in and look, I'm not saying they're going to find him not guilty, but I do think that jurors should think about what's actually going on here, whether this person has been treated with fair due process, has been treated exactly the same way as anybody else would have been treated under the same circumstances. And if they don't feel that way, then they lose trust in the judicial system. They lose trust in the prosecutor, and they may come back with either an acquittal or a conviction on a much lesser count than maybe is required here.
I think so. And I'd say right here, Marlon hit the nail on the head. Giving him the death penalty was the other side, Republicans, make an example out of him and trying to dissuade their behavior, killing CEOs. Yeah. And I actually think that Marlon is onto something. I didn't want to say that, but I feel that. I guess you would say I lean conservatively, but I am kind of disgusted by some of the behavior of some Republicans, which we're about to get to in a moment here, because you also mentioned, moving into the next case, 3 more prosecutors, we learned, resigned this week over the Eric Adams case dismissal, which is a complete fiasco. We could go over this over and over again. I think I haven't had you on since now the Judge Ho actually dismissed the case with prejudice, and now you have Eric Adams running around the city. He's partying again because he feels he's in the clear when, he's involved in so many other things. Okay. And here it is that the email, the prosecutors, Celia V. Cohen, Andrew Rohrbach, and Derek Wickstrom, said that Todd Blash, the Deputy Attorney General, had placed a condition on reinstating him, quote, that we must express regret and admit some wrongdoing by the office in connection with the refusal to move to dismiss the case. We will not confess wrongdoing when there was none, end quote, they wrote. So, Sarena, give us your take on that one, because we were following that, and it kind of also the blow over, it kind of also coincides with Luigi Mangione's case. Remember Eric Adams' defense with what he said, which we could use in the Luigi case as well, that it affects his job. So what do you thoughts on all of this?
The hypocrisy is insane. Eric Adams loves to be a hypocrite. He just does not care. He will say anything. And half the time, somehow it just works for him. It's crazy. His case ends up getting dismissed, not because of a lack of evidence, not because of a lack of credibility with the investigation into him or anything like that, not because of anything substantive in the case at all. His case ends up getting dismissed. Why? Because of 2 reasons. Number 1, he claims it interferes with his ability to do his job, that is, do whatever President Trump tells him to do. And then number 2, that there were pretrial prejudicial public statements made about him by the U.S. Attorney's Office, right? Ignoring the fact that as he's speaking that out of this side of his mouth, out of that side of his mouth, he's doing the exact same thing to Luigi Mangione, making all sorts of prejudicial statements, doing the perp walk, calling him a murderer, etc. So, rules for the not for me. That's the way it goes. And so, yes, the judge in Eric Adams's case, he only had a couple of options. He didn't necessarily have a total ability to just tell the prosecutors like, hey, I'm not dismissing this case. He had an outside counsel come in to try to figure it out objectively, to give him his legal options. And ultimately that person told him not only that he kind of had to dismiss the case, but to reject dismissing the case without prejudice, because in that way you could kind of have a quid pro quo continuing, but advise the judge, right, to dismiss the case with prejudice, just kill it in its tracks, just dismiss it, get it done. Because at the very least, even though the dismissal was a terrible decision, at least you couldn't resurrect it later by holding that, carrot and asking Adams to do all sorts of different things, right? And so that all ends up happening. That's a disaster. But now we have all these attorneys who have resigned in light of all of this. And now we have these three newest attorneys resigning because they were placed on leave, apparently placed on administrative leave, because they were part of the crew who said, we're not going to dismiss this case. If you remember, there were some reports when this was all going down that like all these attorneys were collected in a room, right? It's like this really weird thing that you can imagine happening. Everybody's collected in this room, and Emil Bove, our good friend from the feds, right, comes in and is like, you have to dismiss the case. And apparently one by one, the attorneys were like, no, I'm not doing it. No, I'm not doing it, until somebody finally was like, I'll just take the heat and I'll do it. So it sounds to me like these three were three of the people who were like, I'm not doing it. They're placed on administrative leave, and now they're told, okay, fine, you could come back in, but only if you admit that you messed up, that you should have dismissed the case and you were wrong. They're like, we're not going to do that because we weren't wrong. And we're prosecutors. We took an oath of office not to lie. We're always told to do the right thing in the right way. So that's where we are with these three. Kudos to those three for choosing integrity.
That's what I think. I say the same. They have high regards of integrity. People should be honored to have three people that are serving them in a public in that manner, because people like to question DOJ. I think they had a lot of integrity. Here's another thing. Eric Dim just said something, and this is going back to Luigi Mangione. How many officers in how many officers in the New York City administration have the Mangione perp walk as their background? Another way to taint the case, and it's an active case. But this thing with Eric Adams, because you mentioned everything we've been talking about, right? One of his defenses was, I can't do my job, right? And all that nonsense. Then the Justice Department, the DOJ itself, was stating that there has to be dismissed because it's going to interfere with his work, meaning as the mayor, as a campaign. He's running a campaign, and that he's so Eric Adams can't effectively do his job, which is helping with illegal immigration and deporting people, which he can't, because we mentioned in the very beginning how the city law states that you cannot cooperate with ICE, meaning corrections, NYPD, and civil enforcement, so on and so forth. So that's why they wanted to dismiss this case. So they don't want to interfere with his potential campaign and his running of operations in the city day to day. But now the Republicans in the House, House Republicans, meaning in Congress, criminally refer Andrew Cuomo for things that are 5 years old and should have been charged immediately. They waited to drop this little nugget on his plate and say, we want to criminally refer him because he lied to Congress, which is, again, I mean, everyone has done that. And the last person to be charged with that was Steve Bannon. And of course, Roger Stone was put through hell for that. And they want to charge Cuomo for that. But Sarena, doesn't that interfere with his campaign and his way of trying to run for office? But they want to charge Andrew Cuomo, Sarena, but they can't finish the prosecution of Eric Adams because it's interfering in his campaign. Somebody make sense of this.
Right. Did I mention that there's hypocrisy in these politics? Like, it's just the most transparently hypocritical thing that you could do, right? I am so glad you raised that point because it does not make sense. It's, again, rules for thee, not for me. How does it make sense that you had to stop a prosecution from continuing because it interferes with your mayoral run, but now you could start a prosecution against somebody who's doing a mayoral run? It makes no sense. And again, it goes back to everything in this justice system, which is if you can't trust that the justice system is working, that it's being, used fairly for everybody, no matter who you are, then we can't trust that anything that they're doing is right. And the worst thing that could happen to our judicial system is a lack of trust, because now we don't know who's telling the truth, what's going on. And, look, yes, I'm a defense attorney now, but I was a prosecutor for 10 years. And generally, I also run conservative I don't want crime all over the place either. But if we don't have a trust in our government or our police or our prosecutors, then we can't trust that the right people are going away for the right amount of time, meaning the people who commit crimes, and that the wrong people, meaning the innocent people, are not getting wrongfully convicted. We just can't have that trust if this is what's going on.
Yeah, and I think people make value judgments and they're running things on feelings here. I personally, would I vote for Andrew Cuomo? No, but I'm not going to let that get in the way with saying, hey, you're trying to charge him for something from 5 years ago using your own logic.
Yeah.
You must wait till November because you're going to interfere with his run for office, because that's what you said about a man who's not only guilty of what he's done, which is Eric Adams. Sarena, how many people pled guilty and were in this grand jury with this whole Turkish bribe thing, which is the start of something much bigger, by the way. There's a lot more after this and around this, but the government essentially said, we can't do this because it interferes in your work and your campaign, but we're going to go interfere in Cuomo's campaign. And I'm saying this, no matter how irrespective of how you feel about individuals, justice is supposed to be unbiased and even, seeking justice and prosecuting people. And here we are now, because it looks like Republicans have a little bit more say. We're going to go after political enemies and, sharpen our knives. Regardless of how you feel about Andrew Cuomo, I don't feel that's right. I don't.
It's not right. It's not right at all. And so here we are. We're in this really strange place where we're just hoping that everybody behaves and does the right thing, but we're at their whim and they're not. So we're the victims of all of this. Everybody here is a victim of it.
I know. I don't find that to be something that's positive as far as people that now. That's why you have a lot of victimless crimes or victims that don't want to come forward, because remember, now there's people that have guilty convictions, which you saw also. I mean, Egon Erkan, which was one of the defendants that pled guilty, was going to be cooperating witness against Eric Adams, and Mohammed Bahi. Now their lives are ruined, Sarena. You saw what happened. They don't know what the DOJ does not know what to do with that case now.
Nor should they. I mean, how do you reconcile this, right? You had people come out and essentially they were a proffer witness, right? They're proffered. They come in, just for people who don't know, although I know you have a lot of law enforcement who watch this, so they do know what a proffer is. But when you are being investigated and, basically it's shown that you did do something wrong, but you're not the big fish, prosecutors will come in and say, hey, listen, little fish, come on in. Give us some information about the big fish and we'll give you a better deal. We'll give you, a much better deal than you would have gotten otherwise. And so we're talking about little fish here who got convicted, who pled guilty after apparently having given information about Adams or surrounding those events. And now they didn't prosecute big fish. So how, if I'm them, if I'm the little fish, I'm trying to pull back my plea. I'm trying to do something to be made whole, because you relied on my information and then you prosecuted me. There's something wrong about that. There's something wrong about it. Now they're stuck with a criminal record and Eric Adams gets to keep visiting his shorty. Like, how does that make sense?
And and again, I don't know what birdie's in his ear, and President Trump or DOJ, whether it's Boris Epstein or Emil Bove or Todd Blanche. This was a black eye for not only the administration. It could be used politically down the road for midterms, but it's terrible. And here's a question here from Eric Dim. Sarena, how does a prosecutor protect themselves going forward as Adams has shown his public service as priority over justice?
Yeah. You know what I say to that? Because I was not protected when I tried to do the right thing under this administration. I got fired. You're asking the wrong person. But no, actually, I learned a lot in the last 3 years. And the truth of the matter is, what you need to do is keep your head down until he's out. It doesn't seem, I don't want to speak too soon, but hopefully he's out soon enough. Hopefully the next person comes in is less corrupt than he. The problem only happens if you, as a prosecutor or some officer of the court, somehow end up getting a case or getting involved in something where you are asked to do something unethical. In that situation, there's really nothing you can do. You have to do the right thing as an officer of the court. And unfortunately, you might be retaliated against if that happens. Obviously, if that does happen, you have to decide whether you want to pursue a lawsuit. That's one way to handle it. But if he is only going to be in for a few more months, my advice, if you're a prosecutor, is try to keep your head down, maybe call out sick for a little bit, just try to avoid the big ticket items so that you can make it over the hump.
Yeah, so the lone silencer says Cuomo deserves to be punished, but it won't be right if it is only him when Adams needs to be as well, and even more so than Cuomo. And that's that you hit the nail on the head, lone silencer. I'm saying the same thing, that you can't treat one person differently than the other. Now, to me, that seems like a little interference, because if you look at the race, who does the White House want as mayor? The puppet for him, Eric Adams. Okay. He doesn't want Cuomo, who clearly doesn't like him. Curtis Sliwa, who is the Republican, is not a sycophant for Trump. Yes, he agrees on a lot of things, but he's not going to do whatever this guy wants to do, especially what they're doing with technically what he wants corrections to be doing in the NYPD, when it violates these rules and laws that'll get people in the crosshairs of state prosecutors. So you don't want this, but again, that's what they want. So what do they want to do? Yeah. Let's damage Cuomo so that the secret candidate, Eric Adams, gets risen from the ashes for the Trumpy. I saw him with Laura Trump, and he's sitting there acting like everything's fine. And he's talking about partying at restaurants that are now closed because they're all felon owned and felonious activities going on. That's who he is. And Laura Trump, who's Eric Trump's wife, giving this guy a spotlight again. I don't know what this is about, other than I could tell you the underbelly of what it is what I'm saying. They want Eric Adams as the mayor. Why? Because it benefits the Trump administration. I'm a Trump supporter. I voted for the guy. I vote for him again. I wholeheartedly disagree with his associating or his puppetry of Eric Adams. I think this is not what this country was built on. Had people known this prior, I don't know if he would have gotten as many votes as he did in New York or any other state. But, this is not what this country is built on. I thought we were trying to get away from that, especially with the last character in office. But
I totally agree. Totally agree. And Adams is the yes man that they want. And it makes sense to them.
That's how I see it. Mm-hmm. Now, the final piece I wanted to talk about here, especially now I'm going to have you throw your prosecutor hat back on. You've seen the prior show where I had on Jason Goodman, who made he presented a lot of evidence about a lot of politicians, including another prosecutor you might know, Andrew Weissman, who's one of the most evil people ever to be a prosecutor anywhere. But they all, including our favorite person, the New York State Attorney General, and I'll say this for everybody, she's an alumni of the Con Sofrito, Letitia James. And look, there's more trouble with that because there's mortgage fraud and bank wires and all this stuff. And here, this is just out today, okay? The Letitia James files. Letitia James is now a slumlord, apparently. Tenants complain of peeling paint, apartments used as hotel rooms, and every unit reported bed bug infestations, okay? So, and this Joe Gilbert will be on Tuesday to discuss this. He's one. But now, here's the thing. you see that there's all this mortgage fraud that's going on. I mean, in one of the paperwork, I believe Tish James said she married her father to get a lower rate. She has a primary residence in Virginia. That Sam Antar completely exposed her on that. There's campaign finance laws that she's broken when she has 501c3s donating to her campaign, which is 100% illegal. But what is your take on all of this? Or how would you approach this and how prosecuting her as the attorney general, who's clearly these documents are damning, and she's running around saying MAGA, MAGA, MAGA's doing this. No, the documents are public. It's actually a citizen, Sam Antar and Joel Gilbert, who are doing this, that they brought this to the public's sphere. And now you might see something with the DOJ criminal referral and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because these kinds of cases where it's all paper, right? It's a paper case. It's not like an assault where it's like, oh, this guy hit that guy. And a lot of times these cases are actually easier to prove because the evidence exists, right? I mean, think of it as simply as like filing a false instrument. We have cases like that. You've probably had cases like that when you were a police officer, but then expand that to a larger degree, more things that were filed than just one piece of paper. So if you're a prosecutor, you're going to hunt down all of those leads. You're going to want emails, you're going to want text messages, all of that data, and you're going to want filings, court filings. Then when you get all of that information from the paper, you're going to see names of people right in those papers, people who either participated in or knew about what was going on, and you have to follow the lead down that trail. You have to interview those people. You have to maybe treat them as little fish, right? Proffer them and say, look, you were a co-conspirator here. Maybe if you kind of tell us what happened here, did you feel pressure from her? Did you not really know what was going on? Tell us what happened and why you did what you did. And it might help strengthen a case against Tish James. I do think that there is something for her to worry about because, as you and I both know, and we've been talking about this throughout this whole episode, even a lot of times people do things that are wrong, and sometimes they're not caught, or sometimes they are caught, like Eric Adams, and not prosecuted. But we all know that when there's an appetite for it, that's when you have to be worried. So Letitia James, she may have been doing all of these things, but like no one really cared, or maybe people didn't know about it as much as they do now, or they didn't have an appetite for it because maybe politically they needed to align with her. Whatever it is, the stars have now aligned. The stars have aligned in such a way where there's apparently some sort of evidence that exists against her, and there's an appetite to go after her. So with all of that together, I do think she needs to worry about what's going on here.
Yeah, I think she's in deep trouble here. And like Eric Dim just said, Serena's spot on. Sam Antar showed the evidence that was overwhelming, not circumstantial. And I agree. And there's even more because you hear about the slumlord thing. Now you also have the mortgage fraud, right? Which now apparently Adam Schiff, Jamie Raskin, both were in Congress. Now one's in the Senate. They did this. We also have Andrew Weissman. He apparently did this. And it's right in your face. And it seems to be all attorneys as well that are doing it, which means they represent themselves. They don't need another attorney in their ear going, you can't do that. You know, it's illegal. And they get away with it. I think Jason Goodman said it great. He said this best on the last show. He's doing a great job unveiling this stuff, uncovering all this. And Sam Antar and Joel Gilbert and even Roger Stone have completely obliterated Tish James' evidence of what she's done. And I guess the grand finale with her is that, again, I'm going to bring this up again. She was hanging out at that seedy, shady place in the Bronx where human trafficking was reported to the NYPD. They file a report, and then that goes nowhere, and the party goes on, and she is the most prominent face that's going there every night with all this stuff going on, and there's fundraisers that were not produced, the campaign finance reports for people, and she's there. And we also have to remember there's Act Blue, so there's money that she's not accounting for correctly. There is the self-admitted criminal mob associate, Jimmy Rodriguez, who was the manager, owner, whatever you want to call this place. Very chummy with her. Someone that any lawyer, even someone like yourself, Sarena, could be disbarred or sanctioned for hanging out with, because clearly you have the power as a prosecutor to make somebody a convicted criminal, but you're hanging around one who clearly is and has so much criminality around their place. that it really pulls the question, who's really pulling the strings? And that one is still in your face, waiting in the open, and no one's even touched that one yet about that human trafficking.
Yeah, it sounds like there's things unraveling and developing, right? You know better than anyone. You start pulling that thread and all of a sudden the whole sweater unravels at your feet, right? So I think again, because the fact that there's this attention now, there's going to be digging and who knows what's going to come of it. And it's, people are saying she brought this energy on herself. Like, maybe she did. Maybe she did, because you have to understand that when you have lawfare, or when you do things because it's politically motivated, or not do things because it's politically motivated, you're going to start pissing off enough people that they're going to start looking into what you've done. And then she's going to have to deal with those consequences. Again, these are all allegations. We don't know, but it is something that she's probably speaking to a lawyer about, I would hope.
Yeah, I think she should speak to a lawyer. Maybe she should be speaking to you, Sarena.
But then you won't be able to have me on the show anymore for this.
That's
for this
true.
topic.
You don't want that, because you are a crowd favorite. So, Sarena, thanks for coming on again. I know you're pressed on time. So, where can people find you? Where can people follow you? And where can people, try to call you in case they need some help legally?
Thank you, Sal. Yeah. So my law firm is Townsend Law. You can find that on the internet, townsendlawnyc.com. I'm also on X, Townsend _ Sarena. I'm on TikTok as Sarena Townsend, and I'm on Instagram as Sarena T, SarenaTee. So I'm everywhere. You could Google me. You'll find all sorts of things out about me if you Google me. So you could find me anywhere. Thank you so much, Sal. It's so much fun come on anytime you ask.
Oh, thanks for coming on, Sarena. And we'll definitely have you back on in the future. I'm sure there'll be further developments, not only in the Luigi Mangione case, Letitia James. There'll be plenty of things coming forward. So thank you. As I said, I truly respect your legal opinion and your legal analysis on things, because you've always been spot on, and nobody knows the Crumbs administration better than you, that unfortunately fell under the thumb of one Tim Pearson and company. So thank you, Sarena, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and continue the mountain of acquittals you've had lately.
Thank you so much, Sal. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Sarena. Well, there you have it, folks. Sarena is usually spot on with all her stuff, and even Hunter in here said, Hunter in the comments, Letitia's having a fundraiser to pay her legal battles. Let me tell you something. She should stay far away from fundraisers. That's another thing that was being alleged coming out of that seedy place up there in the Bronx that's no longer in operation. She's going to have a lot to answer for, meaning Letitia James. And so will Adam Schiff. So will Jamie Raskin, because there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of evidence being presented. And eventually, someone's going to take it up. That's how I see it, because it's too good not to. And again, it's not even political. These are financial crimes. Of course, I still believe that human trafficking report is still the biggest crime out there that no one seems to want to touch, because maybe there's other people that are involved that are even higher or worse than Letitia James. But clearly, she has plenty to answer for. So stay tuned for that one, because Tuesday we'll be having Joel Gilbert on as a guest, who will be discussing this. He was on a flight to New York City, I believe, today. So that's why he wasn't on today, but he'll be on Tuesday. But I'm grateful for Sarena, who I did want to discuss all these pressing matters, as she is not only a former prosecutor, but she's a great criminal defense attorney right now. So now I'm going to segue into the good part of the show, right? So we're going to bring up something that I discussed on the last one, which is always highlight, right? highlightworld.com/battle court. Tuesday, the Chargers played. I told you it was win and they're in, tie if they win. And what do? The Highlight Lifestyle Miami Chargers put in probably the most putrid effort I have seen. They got demolished. We are not probably going to make the playoffs, because Friday, I believe, we have the Cyclones playing the Devils, who are now, I believe, in second place. So, and they're the standings. So the Renegades are in, the Cyclones are in, the Devils are in. The Warriors, who are the fifth place team, will be playing the Devils on Monday. If they tie or win, they will be in the playoffs. And what's sad is that the Chargers, the reigning champions, have had the worst season ever for a reigning champion, where they just either win or lose, and when they lose, it's spectacularly really bad. If you watch Tuesday game, it was gut-wrenching for me personally. And I honestly, even if the Warriors don't win and somehow the Chargers make the playoffs, in my opinion, they don't belong there. They're not on the same level as the other teams. Their play shows it. I mean, they won 4 out of the first 5 games and have blown it ever since. So that's just my take on it. But Friday night, at 7:30 p.m., Magic City Fronton, the Cyclones play the Devils. Devils already in the playoffs. They win or tie. It doesn't really matter. It's really about Monday, whether they win or lose against the Warriors. If the Warriors win, clearly they in. If they tie, they're in. If they lose, somehow the Chargers backdoor their way in the playoffs. And that's pretty sad, to say the least. But this is my pride and joy, my New York Mets. This was yesterday, bottom of the 10th. Sterling Marte with that single up the middle. Pete Alonso scores. Mets win their 7th straight. They swept the Phillies. The Mets are now 18-7 in first place. They have 5 games up. I can't believe this. I feel like it's 1986, 87, 88 all over again. We're the team to be in Major League Baseball. That is very exciting. Francisco Lindor's on fire. We don't even have Juan Soto going yet. He's just being like he's in a little bit of a slump, and he's the main player here. But the Mets, hopefully we continue this. We're in first place. Really good. Great baseball. The last week or so with 7 wins in a row. The Mets are a contender. They're for real. So we'll see what happens as time goes on. They're playing the Nationals, I believe, Friday night in D.C. So, that should at least be a good game, a good series, because the Mets could keep on chugging along. But so I guess that'll be all here for me. Tune in tomorrow at 8:05 live with John and Eric. They're going to have the finest unfiltered. It should be the round table. Listen, they've been churning out some great stuff. Obviously, I had Paperboy Prince on late last week. This week they had Zohran Mamdani on. They've also had Tramel Thompson on last Friday, explaining the whole MTA NYPD fiasco with now. Guess the police department can't go in the transit break rooms because Tramel had this thing out showing pictures from 5 years ago, and the department, of course, with the knee-jerk reaction, John Shell, that's a knee-jerk reaction. So now the police officers, unfortunately, in transit, there's nowhere for them to take a break or even sit down because there's nowhere to go. They have to go all the way to the precinct. I mean, this is crazy stuff, but they'll be on Friday morning. Also, on Wednesdays, again, the executive perspective on 1705 every Wednesday, 5:05 live. Their episode yesterday. If you didn't watch it, tune in yet again. You can watch it on replays and check that out. They always give good analysis or perspectives on things, of course, from the executive perspective. And again, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, 8:05 live, finest unfiltered. And I think they're also adding some Thursday shows coming up because there's so many people to interview that there's not enough time in the day and there's not enough shows to do. So check that one out. That'll be soon. Tuesday, I'll have Joe Gilbert on, like I said. And Joe Gilbert is the one that broke the news about the mortgage, the alleged mortgage fraud of Letitia James, even though the documents showed it. She said she married her father to get a better mortgage rate. But in any event, Joe Gilbert will be on to discuss that and more. Obviously, there's another article I showed today in regards to her being a slumlord. So check that one out. That'll be Tuesday at 1:05 Eastern or 13:05 Eastern, live here on X and on YouTube. Guys, if you can, if you're still tuning in, you're still watching us, hit that like, share, the subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that notification button, and also repost this, share it out on X if you can. And if you do have the time, I have my own YouTube channel, the Sal Greco Show segments. Go on there. You can check out some segments and some old shows there if you can. Like, share, and subscribe also, and hit the notification button on there if you can as well. Folks, that does it. I hope everyone has a good weekend. Enjoy it all. Check out the Mets. Don't forget about Highlight on Friday. And if you're in New York City, please look out, because crime is definitely not down. So just be on your toes when you're walking around New York City. And with that being said, I'm signing off from South Florida, which is a sunny place for shady people.
So this is a biblical moment. You know, when Jesus was on the cross, he said, God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All these Negroes who are asking me to step down, God, forgive them. Are you stupid?